Angel Reese walked into this week carrying more attention than almost anyone in women's basketball, but what actually happened on the court told a very different story from the one she's been promoting all off-season. The spotlight was supposed to follow her like a celebration tour, a fresh start in Atlanta, a statement return to Chicago, and a chance to silence doubts. Instead, what unfolded across two cities turned into one of the most talked about preseason stretches of her young WNBA career, and not necessarily for the reasons she would have hoped. It all started in Chicago on April 29th when Reese stepped back into familiar territory wearing a different jersey. The expectation online was loud. Fans and critics alike were waiting for what many called a revenge game, especially after Reese had openly expressed confidence in her ability to dominate that matchup. The narrative was already built before tip-off. Former team, new chapter, big moment. But once the game started, the tone shifted quickly. Chicago didn't react with emotion or nostalgia. Instead, the game felt controlled, structured, and physically intense in the paint. One of the defining moments came when Kamilla Cardoso made a clean, emphatic block on Reese that instantly spread across social media. It wasn't a chaotic play or a lucky deflection. It was a read, a timing advantage, and a statement from a Chicago frontcourt that looked fully comfortable defending against their former centerpiece. That moment set the tone. Reese still competed, still battled inside, but the efficiency fans expected wasn't there. Shots around the rim didn't fall at the rate people are used to associating with her college dominance. And while highlights circulated, the overall picture was more complicated than the narrative she walked in with. A few days later, things shifted to Atlanta, where the expectations were supposed to reset. This was framed as her new home debut, the place where the energy would finally match her personality, confidence, and public image. Reese had spent the offseason speaking openly about feeling ready for a bigger stage, a different environment, and a fresh opportunity to define her professional identity. But even before the game tipped off, something unusual happened. She avoided pre-game media availability entirely. For a player who has never been shy on social media, podcasts, or post-game conversations, that absence stood out. It added another layer of curiosity heading into a game that already carried attention far beyond a typical preseason matchup. When the action started in Atlanta, the building didn't exactly match the hype that had been circulating online. Gateway Center Arena, a smaller venue compared to NBA-sized arenas, had noticeable sections of empty seats. It wasn't completely quiet, but it wasn't the packed showcase some had predicted either. On the court, Washington arrived with a young, energetic roster, missing some of its veteran presence, but still playing with structure and discipline. And surprisingly, it was the Mystics who controlled key stretches of the game. The final score, an 87-78 Washington win, didn't support the idea of Atlanta dominating a weakened opponent. Instead, it highlighted execution gaps and inconsistency on both ends for the Dream. One of the most discussed individual matchups came against rookie Kiki Iriafen, who made a strong defensive impact throughout the night. Multiple possessions showed her timing and positioning disrupting drives at the rim, including sequences where she altered or blocked shots in the paint. For a young player still early in her WNBA journey, it was the kind of performance that quietly shifts attention inside league circles. Reese still had moments where her physicality showed up, especially on the boards, but the finishing efficiency remained under scrutiny. Several attempts near the rim didn't convert, and online discussions quickly focused on her shooting mechanics inside the paint, especially how she releases the ball under pressure. It became a talking point again, not because of one highlight, but because of repetition across different possessions. Meanwhile, Kamilla Cardoso's presence in Chicago continued to be referenced in comparisons. Her defensive timing in that earlier matchup against Reese had already set social media buzzing, and now, with Atlanta's struggles in the paint against Washington, those clips were being revisited in broader discussions about interior defense and finishing consistency consistency at the WNBA level. What made the Atlanta game even more notable wasn't just the performance itself, but the contrast between expectation and reality. This was supposed to feel like a reset moment. Instead, it felt like another game where execution, spacing, and defensive reads told a tougher story. At the same time, online conversations naturally expanded beyond just Reese's individual performance and started comparing broader league impact narratives. Caitlin Clark's name inevitably came up in those discussions, not because she was involved in the game, but because her presence has become the benchmark for attendance and visibility in the league. Clark's games in Indiana continue to draw strong crowds both at home and on the road, and her impact is often described through tangible outcomes like ticket demand and increased viewership. The contrast being discussed online wasn't about personal rivalry, but about different types of influence in the league. One is heavily tied to media attention and conversation, while the other is consistently reflected in attendance numbers and team results. Back in Atlanta, however, the focus stayed on what was happening in front of fans who showed up to watch a new chapter begin. Instead, they saw a game where Washington's younger players looked more organized in key moments, especially in late defensive possessions and interior coverage. Lauren Betts, who also drew attention in preseason discussions, was mentioned in some broader analysis clips due to strong interior performances elsewhere, adding to a growing conversation about how WNBA frontcourt defense is evolving and how quickly young bigs are adapting to physical matchups. For Reese, the bigger issue wasn't just isolated plays. It was the combination of missed finishes, defensive adjustments from opponents, and a growing pattern of physical contests at the rim where she wasn't getting the same level of separation she often found at the college level. That transition gap is something many rookies face, but in her case, it's being magnified by the level of attention surrounding every possession. Post-game, she addressed the media with her usual confidence, acknowledging the result while still maintaining belief in her game and future performances. That moment quickly circulated online as well, not because of controversy in what she said, but because her personality continues to be one of the most visible in the league, regardless of outcome. Still, the larger conversation around her two-game stretch wasn't just about confidence or personality. It was about fit, expectations, and how quickly narratives form in professional sports. In Chicago, she entered a system that eventually moved in a different direction after 2 seasons of inconsistent team results. In Atlanta, she's now stepping into a new environment, still trying to define its identity. What stands out most from these early preseason games is how quickly the discourse shifts between highlight moments and structural questions. A block in Chicago becomes a viral clip. A contested finish in Atlanta becomes a debate. Empty seats become part of a wider discussion about market interest. And every possession starts to feel like part of a much larger storyline. The reality is, none of this defines a full season. Preseason games rarely do. Players adjust, systems evolve, and rotations change dramatically once regular competition begins. But what these early moments do is shape perception, and perception in today's basketball landscape moves faster than almost anything else. As Atlanta continues to experiment with lineups and rotations, and as Reese settles into a new system, the questions will naturally follow. How will her finishing efficiency translate over time? How will spacing improve around her? And how will the team adjust defensively to maximize her strengths inside the paint? For now, the conversation isn't slowing down. Between Chicago's defensive statement, Atlanta's uneven home debut, Washington's young roster stepping up, and the ongoing league-wide comparisons being drawn online, Angel Reese remains one of the most discussed figures in women's basketball heading into the new season. And as always, the attention follows every rebound, every missed finish, and every headline moment that fans dissect in real time. The only thing left to see is how quickly that narrative can shift once the regular season actually begins.